Welcome to another creative podcast, where creative outcasts come together to share their stories so we can all feel a little less lonely. I'm your host, Janelle Marquez. Hello. Welcome back to another episode. I'm so happy you guys are here. Or if you're listening to this episode after listening to last week's episode, I hope I sound a little bit better. We did a couple upgrades. We upgraded our mic, aka I got a new phone, and I think I'm finally better after being sick. I'm pretty sure I had bronchitis. And I'm segueing into my reminder that if you're a creative and you've been hustling and you've been on the grind and you've been hard at work, take a break before your body forces you to take one. That, I think, has happened to me so much in the last year. I've known this about myself for a while, but now that I've gotten older, I have very much realized that my body does not handle stress well. If I don't prioritize self-care, my body just starts to shut down and I start getting really sick, and I'm talking severely sick. And whenever I get sick, it's usually I'm the most sick during my days off, which I feel like is my body punishing me and letting me know, like, hey, you don't want to take a break? I'm going to force you to take one. So if you're a creative and you're in the midst of a busy season or a busy time, I love that for you, but also prioritize some self-care and relax and unwind and de-stress, because being sick is not fun. I have not gone to the gym in a week. I have hardly socialized. I just feel like I really took for granted my routine I was starting to build. And now that I've had so much time at home to just rest and think about how I can prioritize a little bit more self-care in my day-to-day so I don't end up in the place I had just been in. Being home and having some time to, relax and try to get back to my most healthiest self as I can at this moment, just really reminded me of what it's like to slow down in the midst of being really stressed out, because if you don't, you will get sick or you will burn out. And this topic is one I wanted to cover on the podcast for a while, just because burning out is such a common thing for creatives, and I don't think we talk about it enough. And because we don't talk about it enough, I don't think a lot of us actually realize we're burning out or we're close to burning out before we burn out, because we don't know what it looks like or we don't know what the signs are leading up to it. And I have experienced burnout multiple times in my life, but I've experienced it twice where it has drastically impacted my mental health to the point where I had to go get professional help. So today we're going to talk about my experience with burning out as a creative and how I recovered from it, how you can recover from it, but most importantly, how us as creatives can prevent burnout from even happening. Because we actually can do that. It's just all about being preventative and actually checking in with yourself. So let's get into it. So my first ever experience with burnout ever in my life was when I was 19. I was a freshman in college and it was my second semester, and I decided to take 19 credits, not thinking that was crazy. And on top of that, I was trying to be in RA, and I was also trying to keep my GPA up and do a bunch of things and be social. And I ended up having a mental breakdown where I had a full-on panic attack for failing an exam right around spring break. And I have mentioned before in other episodes that I do deal with bouts of depression and anxiety, but this one was pretty bad. Having a panic attack in front of a classroom of 100 people where I had to leave from being in the front of the class to the back, and I just locked myself in a bathroom stall until a friend came and helped me out. And that was the beginning of spiraling towards one of the darkest depressive episodes of my life. This bout of depression lasted for about 5 to 6 months, and it continued to heavily impact my life for about the next 4, 5, 6 years. But what led to all this? And it's honestly quite simple. I was just battling perfectionism. I was so caught up in being perfect and making sure I had to pass every single class with A's and just trying to be the perfect image of a student that I was not. I did not go to school on scholarships. I, for some reason, felt like I needed to keep up with everyone around me who did. And I just needed to be this perfect person at everything that I did, whether it was socially, academically, even down to my appearance. But I really was trying to keep up this act of I'm so put together and I can do everything. And if you're creative, you know that this is a feeling we often feel so much. And as someone in academia, I felt like this was something I just had to do and keep up. But I burnt out very quick. And I actually never recovered. I got really deep into drinking and partying, and I began to have this negative self-talk that haunted me for years to come. In next week's episode, I will be diving into this part of my life and how being a creative saved my life. But for today's episode, that's pretty much where I'm going to keep it at. The second time I ever really experienced burnout as a creative was kind of similar to this, except I was a new social media manager in my job, and I was obsessed with trying to be a hardworking social media manager. I blame a lot of my most recent burnouts on perfectionism and me also falling victim to hustle culture where I live. And as a social media manager, I just wasn't good at managing my time. And I think that being a perfectionist and time management, that was really hard to balance. And I was struggling trying to find my footing. I remember I was going out and shooting content, and I was doing like these, 4 to 8 hour days, and then I'd come home and work immediately, and I would be working for another 4 to 8 hours, and then I'd fall asleep and I'd wake up and I'd immediately get back to it, and I was constantly doing that. And then because I wanted everything to be perfect, I didn't want to miss a second. I didn't want to be a second late on posting anything. I didn't want to be a second late on announcing anything. And I wanted to be on top of comments and everything, that I would literally be pulling out my hair from how stressed out I was on release days and all these big events that were happening when I had to be the forefront of announcing things. I just felt so much pressure. And then I felt pressure on the marketing end. I wanted to make sure I did my best so to make sure everything could do well. But at the end of the day, I was not the sales person. So I shouldn't have been carrying that responsibility of I hope this sells out. I just put so much pressure on myself. And I was also going to therapy every other week during this time in my life. And I would go from working and then drive to my therapist's office, go to therapy for 45 minutes, and then drive back to either home or work. But either way, I was getting back to work. And I'd say about 8 months into my therapy journey, my therapist was like, I think you might be a workaholic. And I was like, you're crazy. But no, I could not stop talking about work. And what really solidified it for me that I was losing my steam and burning out was when my husband was like, you don't talk about anything but work or what you do for work, and you just seem so high strung and stressed about it. And I was like, what are you talking about? And that's when it hit me that I was so obsessed with my work that I didn't know how to exist as a person outside of work. And I just stopped creating for myself. I gave up on making things for myself. I found no passion in anything creatively. I was so burnt out, and I didn't realize I was burnt out until about a year after going to therapy. I sat in my therapist's office and I was like, I don't want to exist anymore. And she's like, what? And I was like, yeah. And that was the beginning of a depressive episode. And for me, I do fall into depressive episodes and sit with depression when I am burned out. And that's just my reality. These bouts can become really hard for me. And I also experienced this again last March. I felt like I kind of hit a wall, and I was just so burnt out and overwhelmed with everything that I was doing. And I felt like I was trying to do everything at once. And I felt like I was on top of the world, but also at the same time, I felt like I couldn't keep up and nothing was enough. And I know this sounds so a little bit chaotic, and quite honestly, that's just how my brain works and operates at times like this. And it really does take for me to get sick, or my brain just telling me you can't keep going, to come back down to earth and take a second to get my bearings together, because burning out is horrible. I've just mentioned like so many times in the last few years that I've reached burnout, but it's because I haven't really figured out how to prevent burnout, because I do still feel like as a creative, I have to be everywhere at once, and I have to be doing everything, and I have to be maximizing how much money I bring in every month, and I have to be everywhere, even that means sacrificing me time or time with friends or time with family. But at the end of the day, I think this most recent illness has made me a little angry at the fact that I have to sit out and recover because I'm being forced to right now. That's my fault for not prioritizing self-care, and I'm currently reevaluating my work at the moment to see what I can let go of so that I can take care of myself as a creative. And I think the podcast has been really helpful in getting me to slow down and do something different. The work that I do for my podcast is not too different from the work I do at all, but it is different creatively. I think it gets my brain moving in a way that is exciting, and I get to, in a way, I almost get to like break my normal routine and do something that's just a little bit different than most days. And I'm really enjoying doing this, but it's not something that I do every day. So this is just like one step in the direction I'd like to go towards. But once again, I think in my everyday life, I do need to step back and think about how I can function more on the regular without losing my mind, essentially. And I know I'm over here trying to give you advice on how to deal with burnout in this next bit, but quite honestly, I'm still trying to figure it out. And, you know, I think that's what we're all trying to do these days in life, is just figure out the damn thing, whatever it is. I guess I'm kind of in the midst of burning out, but not really, but I am. And you're probably here like, okay, great. So like, if I'm in that same position, how the heck are we dealing with this? First off, my biggest tip with recovering with burnout is to just simply take a break. Because sometimes when you burn out and you're too close to the thing that you just gave everything to and have no more gas left to give to it, you may feel like you're just all done with it. You may just never want to attempt to do it ever again. You may never want to deal with it ever again. And that's all or nothing thinking is very easy to fall into when you're freshly burnt out. But take a step back and just be. When you're burning out, your emotions are maxed out. You have no time to really think about things logically, and you may not make the best decisions. So I always say just take a break. Don't take action on whether you need to continue doing something or whether you need to fully stop something. Just take a second to yourself and allow yourself to recover. Recovery is the biggest thing, and recovery can look differently for everyone. For me, at some points in my life, recovery has meant going to therapy more frequently, or recovery has looked like finding different hobbies outside of the work that I do. But this can look different for everyone. Recovery can also be just taking some time away from it. So putting down the project, stopping the project, pausing the project, and just doing something completely different from it. Recovery can also look like self-care. Recovery could also look like asking for help or asking mentors on how to handle what you're dealing with, or simply handing off the project to someone else and just moving on. So when you're recovering, you just really have to think about like, what can you do best to get yourself back up? Now, let's say you're burnt out and you're trying to recover, but you can't take a break, because part of being an adult is that sometimes you don't get the choice to take a break and step back, which is actually probably more ideal for most people, especially creatives. If you're getting paid to do projects and you have deadlines and timelines to meet, you probably don't have a chance to step back. But I would say slow down. So that means communicating with your team, that means communicating with your clients, letting them know where you're at, because some people might be more forgiving and understanding if they understand that you're dealing with something. However, I am not like this. I am really bad at letting people know where I'm at mentally, because I don't like to let people know that I'm struggling when I'm struggling. I like to let them know after, once I've already taken care of it. But if you can slow down and take on less projects, I recommend doing that. And my last note on recovering from being burnt out is taking a second or taking some time to reignite your spark for what you burnt out from. If you are stuck in that all or nothing type of mentality, you may be left feeling like, oh my gosh, I don't want to ever do that thing again, or I never want to go back to that thing, or I never want to be in that place in my life again. But nurturing that relationship you once had to that thing and making it better and healthier is better for you in the long run. Time and time again, I've had to rebuild my relationship with content creation and photography and what I do, because it is my job and I ultimately do enjoy doing it. But my relationship sometimes has to be mended from time and time again. So most recently, I've been working on mending my relationship to my work, in the sense of I have for so long taken my work a little too personally. I'm trying to separate myself as a person from the work that I have to do. And that's been such a challenge for me, because I am really passionate about the work that I do. But at the end of the day, it is a job and I have to get things done. And I just need to separate my personal feelings from the work that I do, so that I can maintain a healthy relationship with it and keep going and not feeling like I'm getting close to burning out. So rehashing the relationship and building a healthy relationship with the work that you're doing is a very important part to recovering from burnout, because as creatives, I feel like as much as we want to step away from things forever or never do something again, we're probably going to come back to these things time and time again. It's just best to mend your relationship with the work that you do, or whatever it was that you burned out from. You're probably asking yourself, hey Janelle, how can I prevent this? Well, quite honestly, as I've kind of stated, my experience, my track record is not the best on this. So I am going to say these are some things I wish I would have done to prevent burning out, now that I see hindsight is 2020. So first off, when it comes to burning out, the main thing is just, taking on too much at once, or feeling like you are under an incredible amount of pressure that you can no longer maintain this work ethic. So first off, I would not bite more than I can chew. Don't take on more work than you probably should. I am still learning this one. So do what you can with what you have without being maxed out at like full capacity when it comes to your creativity or your work ethic. Just don't do it. And as creatives, I feel like this is such a trap for us, because we feel there is this external pressure, at least that I constantly feel like I need to be doing everything at once and I need to be everywhere and doing everything and be on all the time. But we don't need to. For like our mental sanity, we really don't need to. In fact, we need to be more intentional about how we spend our time and the projects that we take on. That's my hot take. So, yeah. That is one way we can definitely avoid burnout. Second is just time management. I know that I don't manage my time as well as I probably should. And that's just a very simple, basic thing, is just manage your time as best as you possibly can and really utilize the time that you have to rest, to actually rest and give yourself a break. My last bit is just to simply show yourself some compassion when you do feel yourself getting stressed out or you feel like you're not working hard enough. As a creative, you're doing your best, and as long as you're trying, that's more than anyone could simply ask for. Effort is so needed in this industry. As a creative in any industry, I feel like we put so much of ourselves out there and we exert so much of our energy and creativity into the things that we do that sometimes we forget to fill up our own cups. And compassion is a really great way to show yourself some love, and just be patient with yourself and be really kind to yourself. Speak kind thoughts to yourself, because as a creative, a lot of times you don't have anyone rooting for you. You have to be your own cheerleader. So really stand up for yourself, speak kindly to yourself, acknowledge your hard work when you are doing it, because if you don't stop and smell the roses for a second, you may not even get handed any roses at the end of it. And that's just the reality of it. So we need to take care of ourselves. So fill up your own cup before you go and fill someone else's. That's really the biggest takeaway with all of this when it comes to burning out, is just, if you feel like you're running low on gas, if your energy is so low, recharge. Take the time to actually do it, because you will burn out. And sometimes recovery from burnout can take years. And a lot of us don't talk about how much of a toll that takes on our mental health. And I have been someone who has been impacted by it so deeply for so much of my life. And I don't wish that upon anyone. I hope no creative ever has to deal with the creative ruts I've dealt with the hardships I've dealt with the battles I've had in my brain, because being a creative is so wonderful and so great, but at the same time, you can just feel so alone and very misunderstood. And I don't think anyone should ever feel that way. So if you're dealing with burnout, if you feel like you're stuck, if you feel like you don't know how to go up from this downward spiral you've been going, you're not alone. There are so many people out there who want to lend an ear, who are willing to help you out, who just want to support you, who just want you to thrive and do well. So find your people, lean on them, but most importantly, be really kind to yourself. Take care of yourself and just be that person you wish somebody could be towards you, if that makes sense. Burning out sucks, but let's be real, we all go through it. Each and every one of us deals with burnout. So all creatives deal with burning out, and I feel like a lot of us just don't want to talk about it, because once again, we're only sharing our highlights of our lives. And as fun as it is to talk about the good times, I think it's also just an important thing to keep in mind that we're all humans. So at the end of the day, if we don't have that connection to what we're doing or who we're working for or who we're working with, it can really be hard on the mind. And at times like these, I just think, be really kind to yourself, because you're so deserving of it. But that is everything for this week's episode. If you tuned in, thank you so much for listening and for watching. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to subscribe. If you're on Spotify, make sure to follow so you don't miss next week's episode. And I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!